I want to start by telling you something that happened at a lunch table 2 years ago. Something a woman said to me that undid 81 years of the way I had been seeing myself. I'm Margaret. I'm 83 years old. And what she said in that moment was so simple and so completely unexpected that I cried the entire drive home. Not out of sadness, out of waste. Because I finally understood what I had been doing to myself and for how long I had been doing it. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the second of 4 daughters. My mother was a practical woman, not unkind, but the kind of person who noticed everything. Who had the nicer house? Whose children had better grades? Whose husband had the steadier job? I absorbed that way of looking at the world, the way children absorb everything, quietly, completely, without knowing it was happening. By the time I was a teenager, I had already learned to measure myself by looking sideways. I married young. His name was Robert, and he was a good man, patient and steady in the way that certain men are, the kind of steady that you don't fully appreciate until much later. We built a life together in the suburbs of Cincinnati. A house with a good yard, 2 children who grew into people I genuinely like, a garden I tended every summer for 40 years. By any honest measure, it was a full and fortunate life, but I couldn't see it that way. I was always looking at the house across the street, the vacation someone else was taking, the career my college roommate had built while I had stayed home with the children. There was always something I didn't have that someone else did, and I let that feeling quietly eat at every good thing I was given. My sister Diane was the one I measured myself against the most. She was the beautiful one. Everyone said so. And she had married a man with money and moved to Connecticut and had a life that looked from the outside like everything I had imagined wanting. I love Diane. I want to be clear about that. I never resented her the way you might resent an enemy. It was more complicated than that. I loved her, and I measured myself against her at the same time. And for decades, those 2 things existed side by side in me without ever resolving. Robert passed away 9 years ago, lung cancer, very fast. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. And in the year after he died, I had a realization sitting at my kitchen table one evening that I want you to hear. Because if you're anything like me, you are doing the same thing right now, today, and you don't even know it. I was 74 years old, alone for the first time in my adult life. And I was still comparing myself to other people, still reading my college classmates' obituaries and noting what they had accomplished, still driving past a beautiful house and feeling that old familiar ache. 60 years of the same habit, and it had never once made my life better. Not once. It had only ever made the life I had feel like it wasn't enough. The conversation happened 2 years ago. I was at a small gathering, nothing formal, just a few women from my church circle who had been meeting for lunch once a month for the better part of a decade. And one of them, a woman named Patricia, who I had always quietly envied for her composure, her elegance, the effortless way she seemed to inhabit her life, said something that stopped the entire room. We had been talking about aging, about the things we wished we had done differently, and Patricia put down her glass and said very quietly, "I spent the first half of my life wishing I was Margaret." The table went still, and Patricia went on to explain, calmly, without drama, the way you explain something you have carried for a long time, that she had watched my life for 30 years and seen something I had been completely unable to see myself. She said she had always admired my warmth, my garden, the way my children looked at me, the ease I seemed to have with my own home. She said she had envied the way Robert and I had been together. She said she used to drive past my house sometimes and feel that particular ache. I didn't know what to do with that. I sat there for a long moment and felt something move in my chest that I can only describe as the sensation of a lock opening that had been closed for a very long time. Because here was a woman whose life I had spent decades envying, and she had spent those same decades envying mine. We had been standing on opposite sides of a window, each of us pressing our face against the glass to look at the other, and neither of us had thought to turn around and look at what was already in the room. I cried on the way home, not out of sadness exactly, but out of something that felt like release and also waste. The waste of all those years I had spent measuring, all those mornings I'd looked at someone else's life and felt insufficient, all the ordinary moments of my own life that I'd moved through without really seeing them because I was too busy looking sideways. What I understand now at 83 is this: comparison is not a character flaw. I spent years thinking there was something wrong with me for feeling it. There isn't. It is a habit of perception built slowly and early that tells you the measure of your life is always somewhere outside of it. And like all habits, it is so familiar that it stops feeling like a choice. It just feels like the truth. But here is what nobody told me. And here is what I want to say directly to you right now before this video ends. The person whose life you are envying is probably looking at yours the same way. I don't know who you are watching this, but I suspect that some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. The quiet scroll through someone's photographs that leaves you feeling smaller. The friend's success that you're genuinely happy about and quietly diminished by at the same time. The life you are living right now, in this moment, that you are somehow unable to fully inhabit because part of you is always somewhere else, measuring. I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me 40 years ago at my kitchen table in Cincinnati. The life you keep looking past is the one that someone else is pressing their face against the glass to see. It was always enough. You just never turned around to look at it.